Good evening. It's an invigorating 88 degrees and the air quality index is in the 20s, and if I remember correctly, is considered good until it gets to 50. Then we have to start getting concerned. But it is moist in the air, and you kind of feel like you're walking through the moistness. So it's not 100% wonderful. But it was in the 90s, and a couple of times went through the 90s to 100. So it's been quite a day here in Virginia, and you may be having the same problem elsewhere. And it remains to be seen if I'll devote the latter part of this walk to running. Yesterday was okay, because I was in a silly mood, of course. But today we'll find out. When we're taught when we're kids, crime doesn't pay, or at least a lot of us are, unless you're in a mob family, or within 3 degrees of consanguinity to Trump. Trump is a model example of crime does pay for him. In other words, he has earned, since he left the White House, and maybe just this year, $1 billion. You would think a guy with that would think of something positive to do besides running down a nation, playing traitor to our democracy, wanting to overturn an election he lost. But I guess you don't get $1 billion if you play straight. And as a kid, I remember being told by the Dominican nuns that a bad person was a good man's problem. And I understood that to be we're supposed to find some way in our good acts to reform the bad person. But as you get older, you realize it's a trap, because the good man is the temptation. Let me run that back. The bad man is the temptation for the good man to take that shortcut. I want to have what he has. And a lot of people do. And as a public experiment, more than a thought experiment, we've seen Trump do exactly that with his loyal, corrupt minions. He just has these circles of people, and they do what he wants, and they figure they've latched on to that train, and he's going to take them where he's going, and they don't care if he's loyal as long as they get him where he's going. And they also have this conspiracy working. So there we have Trump, $1 billion. And get this, he gets paid for talking. You would think he would already be doing that for free, and no one would need to pay him. But I assume something goes with that. Maybe you just show him a document or something. Anything is possible. Now, let's turn to another sad state of affairs, the Congress, particularly the Republican leadership. We have always agreed internally on at least funding our armed forces. Security has always been a concern, although we were very nervous about arms when our young republic was being built because of what we observed about Great Britain. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted the freedom of a militia should the government become strong and we the people needed to fight it. Well, the militia has been subsumed into the current standing army that we have at the federal and state level, and there is no more legal militia. And so we have a true concern about how we protect our nation and when and why do we need to. Now, the gaggle of gruesome guys and a few gals on the House side in the Republican Party, they think, and it's no joke, they think the Pentagon's all too woke. And forgive me for my sad, spontaneous rhyme. But and what are they upset about? Well, they're upset about efforts for equality, and they're upset about problems about diversity, and anybody who does that has got no business being funded. Some of them believe that. So some Republicans crossed over, some Democrats didn't make it. So the close vote was 219 to 210. And that's shameful when we're supporting Ukraine and we have Republicans scratching their heads saying, I don't know why we should support Ukraine, implicitly leading us to know that they're supporting Putin, who was the godfather for Trump in 2016 in that election. So you see how deceptive the entire process is. Springs and wheels, springs and wheels. The goings-on of the Republicans do put us at risk. And they keep using the term that there's a culture war. This is not culture. This is not culture at all. This is a hate coalition. This is an autocratic movement. This is a continuing conspiracy to overturn our Democratic and Republican government so that they can run it seemingly any way they want, because they have no program they can tell us about. So that's pretty terrible. So their culture is not a culture, it's a cutthroat war, and they don't care who's left bleeding on the field of battle. And so it's not just a battle among those of us who believe in individual rights and liberties and those who don't. It's also a battle that we be safe and secure from those that challenge NATO, because they challenge us. Because we have dedicated ourselves to helping Ukraine, and we may be a little too cute about how involved we want to say we are, or how involved we are. Now, in the category of individual rights and liberties being compromised, there appears to be a much more visible campaign in the last several weeks, months, maybe the year. And it's similar to the attack on women in the sense of no rights are presumed. So we have this evil ethic, diabolic discrimination against gays and women and a whole host of other people. But let's talk about a gay couple running a restaurant in Aldie, Virginia. A family moved next door, and they immediately put out literature about how Jesus is not comfortable with gays. I never read that he said it 100 years after they memorialized what he had to say after his death and the questionable resurrection, which Thomas Jefferson in his Bible would not report. But we have them also saying all lives matter, which is the bigots' reaction to Black Lives Matter. And why would we say all lives matter when the people who are challenged are black? And that we have to, if you will, affirmatively say that blacks matter. And they do. And they've meant a great deal to the progress of America from the flimsy promise that we were all equal before the law, as we grew it into something that meant something. And as others got the right to vote, and that meant something. But it's meaning less every day that the Republicans go unchecked and are not forced to account for their misconduct. So this restaurant down in Virginia is in a position now where the couple that had the restaurant couldn't find enough support in the community in the end, although they gave them all the right statements about support. But when push came to shove, for them to preserve their sense and safety, they had to sell the restaurant and leave the community. It's just wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And then there's a case that's interesting too. A Roman Catholic school, well, they had a teacher And the teacher wasn't getting notified about when he was going back to school. And he had just had a marriage with his gay partner. And it turned out that the school thought they could tell him not to teach based on the fact that it was a Roman Catholic school that doesn't approve of homosexuality, or however they described it, which is truly ironic when the Roman Catholic Church and other institutions have been caught short on the predatory aspects of their organizations for which they don't act, which is pretty interesting. Long time ago, when I ran for Congress, it was toward the end of the campaign, and I was in territory where the people were supportive, and maybe it was my campaign thought, it'd be good to have people reassure me. So it was late at night, the hall was full, and I asked any questions, which is always the most fun for me, because you hear the thinking of people and you get to talk to them. So one man stood up, he may not have been the first questioner, and he said, how do you feel about gays teaching our children? And I said immediately, I think you should teach wherever you want to. Everybody laughed, but he didn't get it, not at first. Then he realized that I was assuming that he was gay. And he immediately said, well, I'm not gay. And I said, well, how am I supposed to know that? I think the laws we have, which apply equally to heterosexual or gay activity, if unwanted, if assault, if battery, if predatory, if attack, apply to everyone. So I don't have to know what your sexual preference or experience or gender is. It was in the days before we talked about gender. All I have to know is, have you conducted yourself in an unlawful way, no matter what is your preference sexually, whatever your lifestyle is. So, it was a friendly audience, so I got a good applause. And afterwards, some came up to me and told me that on election day, they were going to walk out of their closets and vote for me. They said it. They knew it was funny. It was funny. And I guess they did help me get 95,000 votes, but it wasn't enough. But you get my point, which is, like the people say from time to time, why can't we get along? Why can't we just get along? And there's something at the basis of these people who claim to be religious, faux Christians, F-A-U-X, F-O-X Christians, same thing, and who don't subscribe to the Sermon on the Mount. And really, few of them actually have read the good book, which would surprise them in a diversity of directions. And, even if they just read the Stoics or just thought about how they'd like to be treated. James Baldwin had, I think, the best arguments of the 60s, which is his starting point for most discussions were, except for my face, what do I want that you don't want? What do you want that I don't want? That's all. That's it. That's the equation. We get past that, we're in a different place. So, down in the Plains, Virginia, these people were so upset that they ran these people out of town and they call themselves Christians. It's terrible. But then there's also the teacher who would teach in a Roman Catholic school who was told that he need not expect to return there. And he brought a lawsuit and he won it. And it's back in the papers again. And the lawsuit found that he was discriminated against, and they couldn't do that, and they shouldn't do that. So, now, down in Texas A&M, there was a journalist who was going to head up a section of the school. Lots of background, very serious professional journalist. But she's on record as supporting diversity. So they don't want her teaching at Texas A&M. Imagine that, huh? The other thing that's in this category of discrimination is the new Iowa law. It does several things. We're familiar with the 6-week rule, that you can't have an abortion after 6 weeks. And I think they have provisions for treating the doctors who violate that with criminal sanctions. But there's another thing, which is the exception for rape or incest requires the woman victim to meet a timetable to have that abortion. So if it's rape, she has 45 days. If it's incest, she has 140 days. Now, we are all familiar with the fact that rightly or wrongly, very few people come forward right away. So the timetable, it seems to me, is to force women to have a child rather than surrender their privacy to secure their health and safety. What a place we live in, huh? Now, we have to run these people from the village square. I don't mean we muzzle them. I mean we have to be there, stronger, and vehemently contradict what they're doing to our nation, calling it a culture when it's really brutish discrimination and hateful underpinnings that evoke the worst fascist governments that reigned before us, that we had to, well, there's several ways to describe it, but I'll be satisfied for the fact that we make these people politically irrelevant. The way Jefferson did when he became president. By the time he finished, the Federalist Party was done. That's why I never understand people that are excited by the musical Hamilton. The music is good, the history is bad. Hamilton was a foe of democracy and the Republic. He didn't trust people. If you read the things he was writing when he and others were trying to get people to support the Constitution, you'll see that. And that's the problem to this day. Those Federalists, those people of Adams and Hamilton's ilk, they don't really believe in democracy. They don't believe in a republic. All you have to do is look at the early manifestations of our government. The House was the only thing that had an affectation of democracy, and no other instrument did. Not the Senate, not the Supreme Court, and it goes on and on. So, be vigilant, pay attention, talk it up, and we'll save this nation yet, despite some of the cowardly behavior of the people that are in the way. So, nice visiting with you. Apparently I'm sweating somewhat, so the 88 degrees today is maybe a little more severe than it was yesterday. So I say goodbye today from my cathedral of trees, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.